All right, hello and everyone, and welcome. It is Tuesday, May 2nd, and welcome to Game Music Composition. My name is Chris Latham, and I am the course director for the course, and I will be hanging out with you throughout the month discussing a wide variety of game audio topics. And this afternoon, in our first session, we will kind of do an overview of the class and an introduction to the topics as a whole. And a large part of our session, it will, maybe towards the second half, will be focused on all of the assignments for week one. This Tuesday session is a bit different than the rest of the Tuesday sessions because there is a bit of this introductory material, but starting out next Tuesday, you will have completed your first round of assignments in your first game composition, and we will be doing a bit of feedback and peer review. So each Tuesday class, we will go over the previous week's material, listening to any submissions for review, and then we will get into the new topics, the new assignments for that week to discuss what's coming up. And of course, today we have a lot to talk about because we're going to talk about our first game composition and go into detail on all of that. So hopefully you've taken the opportunity to check out all of the course materials and download everything, and that certainly is a bit different starting this month. As of May here, we have launched the new FSO system. So if you're having a bit of trouble finding the website, it is now at online.fullsail.edu, and you can get access to all of the class material there. Things are now divided up into modules, and you will find a module for each one of your weeks. So there is an introduction module that has just completion assignments where passes along information to you about the class and my contact information and other policy information there. But for this week, you're going to want to open up and download any of the material for these week one assignments. And as I mentioned, later on today, we're going to take a look at your 2D platformer game composition, your first game project. So you want to make sure you download that, you play the video game, and you check out the project as soon as possible if you haven't done that already. Then there is a series of videos that also go right along with the assignment that describe and go through the process of the assignment. We have another assignment for looping game music. Oh, it says the screen froze, and I sound robotic. Going out. Let me double check the internet connection. Hold on. And let me turn off my Wi-Fi to make sure that that is okay. And I'll keep going for the sake of the archive, and let me know if it does come back in and does clear up in the connection. Let's see if there's anything else I can do on my end. Hold on. Let me know if it gets any better. Well, let's see if it continues on my end. So we have the looping game assignment, which we will discuss starting, after we discuss our game composition assignment. Getting better, but still choppy. Hopefully it will kind of buffer and improve a bit. Let me know, though, if it returns to being just fine, or if it obviously completely drops out and has an issue. So Tuesday and Thursday virtual class. You have already found the link to participate on the live classes. So there is a link, if you're catching this through the archive, there is a link that is available to come to the Tuesday and Thursday classes from 3:30 to 5. And sometimes I do get a bit long-winded, and it might go past 5, but that is the arranged hours. And if you're unable to catch the live session, then you can always catch up with the archive, which is released the next day. So I'm recording everything, and also in this live broadcast, if you are having connection issues, or later on when we're listening to a whole lot of music and maybe the quality of the broadcast is less than amazing, then you can always catch the archive the next day that has the full full resolution stereo recording. So I do post those up as announcements. We on both of our sides, we got to make sure the new announcements system is going to be working just fine for us, but I'm going to make sure that everybody has quick and easy access to that link. So those will pop up on Wednesday and Friday. Each week there is an optional feedback and peer review assignment. It is an unweighted assignment. It is not required, but it is highly, highly recommended that you participate with your composition. And you can gives us an opportunity to go over it and discuss it live. I have Logic here that I can go through and discuss everybody's assignment. For this round, I'll be discussing previous student examples for a current project, just to give you some details and direction as you start out the new first week's assignments. But starting next week, we can load up your submissions into Logic, and I can click around and discuss all sorts of different aspects of it. Everybody does receive a grade sheet and written feedback, but this allows me to go through it with much more clarity and much more detail overall. And if you are able to make the live session, then you can ask questions and we can discuss back and forth. But even if you are not able to make the live session, I can still go through the assignment. If you have an email or a comment and you want me to address that also, I can just go through it in a very clear way for each one of our assignments each week. And so we will do that in each of our Tuesday sessions. And even if you don't participate and don't submit, then you still get to see everybody else's version of it. If we have a couple of submissions, or we have a percentage of people that don't participate, everybody gets to see everybody else's version of the project, which is a great way of seeing all the good stuff and all the bad stuff that you might want to try out or not attempt in your project before you have the opportunity to do revisions each week. So there is a revision assignment that is available in the following week from each one of your assignments that allows you to take all of the feedback, all of the review, and rework your assignment, improve it for another round of grading and another round of submission. So, and of course, I'll go into a lot of detail about the compositions themselves and the projects overall. So that is there and available. You just take your assignments and submit it in a particular way. That allows me to load it up and talk about it in the class and in the archive. There's also suggested reading and viewing. There is a textbook that goes along with the class, A Composer's Guide to Game Music, and it is got great supplementary material about a lot of the topics that we will hit on, and there are suggested chapters that go right along with the different weeks of the month. There's also included videos and just interesting ideas and articles and things to check out that corresponds to the topics for each week. And that is, that's the first week overall. The rest of our weeks, the way the class is set up overall is we have 2 game projects that you will work on, and 2 larger projects for the month that you will take or create custom music, custom sound effects, and take that music and place it into the game and have a fully working custom, fully working game with your custom soundtrack, music and sound effects working in the backgrounds. Music for a game is best demonstrated in the actual game itself, in that context. So we give you working Mac applications that you will download with each one of the week's assignments. And along with that, documentation and information about how you will approach the music and the sound effects. The first week is music for each one of the projects. So week 1 here will be the music composition for your first game called 2D Platformer. Then next week you will do the sound design for that game. And by the end of week 2, you will have the music and sound effects in the game working and tested so that you can figure out if there's any issues or any challenges that you might encounter. And by the end of it, you'll do a video capture of your music working in the game so that you're able to show it off and demonstrate how it works. And then starting in week 3, we'll have a new game project, requires new music, a new approach to the composition, and a new style and genre and overall aesthetic of the music in the overall soundtrack. And you'll do the same thing. Create the music in the first week, create the sound effects in the second week, and all through that process be putting it into the game, testing it out, making any changes, making any revisions, so that by the end of the month you will have 2 working Mac games that have your music, your sound effects, with 2 video captures or demonstrations of it. That you can, and with the large intention that it is meant for adding to your demo reel, your portfolio. You can upload them, put them on a website, put them on Dropbox, and distribute them around, however you want to demonstrate and show off your work. So, and the overall purpose of the class is to really introduce you to this side of the industry. As you go through the music production degree program, you have been gaining your skills or building your skills throughout the different courses. And towards the end of the program, it is more focused on music in the context of different media. So you certainly have done music for music's sake, music for an album, songwriting, music production in just like a traditional media. Then you also worked with music for commercial work, whether it's radio or television, or whether it is recently you were working on music for advanced music for media, which is music for television and film. And now in game music composition, we are just taking all of the skills and everything that you've learned up to this point and just applying it to games, and going to be talking about what is the same and what is the same in the production of music for games, and what is unique and different versus all other forms of media, whether it's on a music album or in a movie or here in a game. The very introduction to that idea is that the creation of the music is identical. It is still the process of, or the understanding of music theory. It is capturing the best performance. It is recording. It is composition. It is production. It's still microphones and instruments and musicians and artists and capturing the best recording, capturing the best performance, and or creating and composing inside of the computer to create the final music soundtrack. Or ultimately, you have a folder filled with WAV files. And most people, when being introduced to games, you understand how to make music up to this point. You have created music. You've created it in all sorts of styles and formats. You know how to, you understand elements of music theory and production, and you can record and mix and create a WAV file. And then what happens with that music is where it becomes a bit more unique, and where the actual media or the actual medium of a game requires some unique elements with that music. And so while the creation of the music is the same, what you do with it after that point is unique. So we're going to be talking about how do you create music for a game where everybody who plays that game should have a unique experience. We'll be talking about the idea of linear versus nonlinear music, or linear gameplay or nonlinear gameplay, where certain elements of a game are completely linear. It's like watching a movie. Everybody will experience the exact same thing in the exact same way. But in other parts of a game, it is completely nonlinear. It's open world. It's you feel like you can go off in any sort of direction in the story, and the player, each person who plays a game might have or will have a different experience. It'll either be a slightly different experience, or it might be a wildly different experience. And your game and your music needs to react to all of that. So we will talk about how do you create music for something where you ultimately don't have control over how the music is going to develop and change. When you watch a movie, there is a 2-hour-long audio file that represents the music and the sound effects and the dialogue from beginning to end. If you have a 2-hour-long movie, you have a 2-hour-long audio file that's either stereo. You might probably also have a 5.1 audio file, and everybody listens to the exact same mix, just same way as a CD or a music album. A film is the same way. There is one audio file that plays from beginning to end, and every single time you rewind back, it's going to be the exact same experience. Well, that's not what happens in a game. When somebody plays a game, everybody's going to have their own unique version of how they play through it. Some people are going to run through as quickly as possible, just guns a-blazing, and are really, really fast and blow by a whole bunch of content. They could even finish the game in a short amount of time, which means that they might not even experience or skip past whole chunks of music and soundtrack. Or there's going to be other folks that are going to be going around in circles over and over again, knocking into walls for 10 minutes before they find the next door to get to the next part of the story. Or they go through the game methodically and at a very, very slow pace. Whatever the case is, your music soundtrack needs to react to all sorts of different types of play. And newer games, more advanced games, give a lot more freedom to the player, where they feel like they are in control of the entire story and the entire world, and the music needs to change and react to every single experience that they have, and needs to feel like it was there or meant to be there the entire time. So music for a game does not exist as one 2-hour-long audio file all the way through the game, or Certainly, games are longer than that. You can sit down with your smartphone and play for just a couple of minutes. You can load up a game on a console or a PC and play for a couple of hours. People get lost in game worlds for tens, if not hundreds of hours. And that doesn't mean that there's over 100 hours of music sitting on a game disc somewhere that plays from beginning to end right along with your story. Music for a game exists in lots of little pieces and parts, little chunks, loops, a couple of bars or a couple of minutes worth of music that plays and changes and reacts to the action that is going on the screen. So your music soundtrack has to be able to ride the ups and downs and the changes in the story. One of the main elements of that would be the action. For periods of time in your game, it might be a slow pace and there's not many enemies around and you're safe at some point. And then all of a sudden, the enemy jumps out and action music kicks in and it builds up at that point. And the composer never will be aware of when a particular event is going to happen because it's going to be different for everybody. So the music has to be able to react to what is going on in the game. And we will talk about how music is built for a game experience where you ultimately don't know the final result. You know what is possible because it is a game. It is only a certain amount of finite choices. So you know what generally the direction where the player's headed and what they are going to do, but how they're going to get there and how long it's going to take them to get there is really open-ended. And we'll talk about how you start from scratch. How do you start from a blank DAW session, open up, and start building your tracks in a way that you can compose and produce and conform your music to work in a game in this manner where it has to change and switch according to what happens. And so we'll get our first taste of that this week with your 2D platformer game composition. So I definitely wanted to introduce the new FSO system. Make sure you get access to it, you get comfortable with it. Also, please let me know if you find any inconsistencies. We did just basically move everything over from the old system to the new system. If you come across anything that is wrong or is missing or is misspelled or edited incorrectly or anything that especially if it gets in your way of smoothly going through the class, then always please give me a heads up. I definitely want to fix anything that we might encounter. What else? Okay, so let's dive into the material here before we talk about the assignments and our first composition. So our class overview, that's basically what I was doing right then, was just kind of talking about the class. I talked about our class sessions on Tuesday and Thursday. Thursday is more of an open-ended session. I have a series of topics that I can hit, but I also want to leave it open first. So if you come with any questions, if you have any issues with the projects, you want me to listen to something or discuss some sort of idea, then please let me know. But the topics themselves each week discusses different aspects of the industry and the production of music for games. The first half of the month is a bit more focused on the creative side, working in the DAW and creating the music and how you might build your session and create your composition in a way that it's going to work in the game. And so the second half of the month will turn more to the technical side of what are some of the tools and the process and the workflow that different game teams use to get your music in the game. Like we have the music, we have the WAV files, we've created and produced that music, then what do we do with it to actually get it into the game? So when somebody has a controller in their hand and they hit a button, or the monster jumps out and the battle ensues, then the correct piece of music plays. So those are our Tuesday and Thursday classes. We talked about getting access to the archive. We talked about our peer review setup for each one of our following Tuesday classes. And all right, so let's get into next part. Again, this is my information. Again, I'm Chris Latham from Game Music Composition, the course director, and I've been with Full Sail for about 15 years now, and have started out in the studios, and that's kind of where my history was before Full Sail, was working in studios, doing post-production work, music recording, dialogue recording, sound effect design, field recording, on location recording, all sorts of different media, and have always had a passion in games, and was trying to figure out more ways of getting involved in audio for games. And a while ago, technology, about 10 years ago or so, technology for games had really opened up, and you were able to access tools where you could tear apart games and put them back together and add your own sounds. And so I really started diving in and taking the audio production knowledge that I had and just applying it to games. And worked on a couple of small mod projects of much larger games, independent game teams, and took some of the, built trailers and did all the music and sound effects for the games, and put it out to EA Sports, which we have here in Orlando, and got some work through them, and has since worked with them a couple of years on mainly Madden, NFL, but also NBA Live, and previously Tiger Woods and NCAA. And then since then, I've been working on a couple of different game projects. The EA Sports credit kind of opened things up and allows for a lot of different client work. And I've since found way more success and way more clients working in the games industry than I ever did in any other part of the industry overall. And I found more consistent work and personally more interesting work. And it's a pretty small community, but the need, which allows or creates a large need for people working in games. And there is one of the main aspects is everything that I enjoy about audio production and music production and recording and composition. All of that stuff is in games. Not only is it music, but it's music and sound effects. And then you add in the visual aspect that I enjoy from film and television work, where your music and sound effects and the whole audio design services the image also. And then you add a third layer of the interactivity in there, where it's not only just music, but it's audio, full sound design plus the image, and the interactivity gives control over to the player, so that it allows for much more creativity and much more variation all the way through. Like I said, as opposed to creating one work that is exactly the same or every single time and is one perfect version, there is a whole system and a whole game that can create music and sound for this experience. And I find the marriage of technology and creativity to be quite interesting overall. So I have a couple of quick disclaimers for the class that I often want to get out of the way pretty early. And the first one is you don't actually have to be any good at playing video games to be successful in this class. I know that folks coming through this class have a wide variety of experience with games. There are certain folks that eat, live, and breathe games. They are interested in games and want to work in the industry and play all the newest and latest games and are up on technology and what's going on in the industry. And I also know that there's folks coming through this class that haven't played a video game since they were throwing quarters into Pac-Man or playing Minesweeper or, I don't know, played Super Mario Brothers back in the day. And that is perfectly fine. Your skills at actually playing the video game, getting the fastest score, or sorry, the fastest time or the highest score, anything like that, your ability to play the video games is not important or required or certainly graded by any means. The skills that are required of you in the class is your skills in creation of music. Your ability to take a client's intentions with the music and actually render it into a music soundtrack. It just so happens that we are applying your music to games. So the skills that are required are the ones that you've been gaining all the way through this degree program. Skills of music theory and production and composition and the technical, like understanding your DAW and your synths and your plugins and automation and formatting and bouncing everything to create a full and final piece of music. So you don't actually have to be any good at games to be successful in this class. The other disclaimer that I want to throw out there, which is a common question that I get pretty early into the process. Do I need to know code, or do I need to be able to program in order to work in the games industry? And that's another no. The skills that are required, again, are your skills in the creation of the music. It's often somebody else's job or task to take the music that you've created and implement it and put it into the game. So there's a long path of knowledge, a lifelong path of knowledge in both of those disciplines. To be a professional coder versus a professional composer, those are two paths that typically don't cross all that much. And it was obvious very early on in game development that your programmers are not going to be your best composers, and your composers are not going to be able to program or your best programmers by any means, if at all. And that's very understood, and that's a common issue in the industry. It's the same issue, or not even an issue. It's just the reality. It's the same reality in art also. The artists, the 2D art, 3D art, animators, environment, textures, modelers, all those folks, they can't write code just as much as the musicians and the sound designers can't write code. So, and the programmers can't draw you a picture or write you a piece of music. So there are tools, and we'll talk about the whole workflow and the process to kind of bridge that gap and make it all work. So now, I will put an asterisk on that to say that any skills that you have are going to be a help and is going to be valuable in the industry. And having a technical knowledge and a technical understanding of the process and being able to basically speak the language and interpret your ideas, because you're going to be working with artists and designers and programmers and all sorts of different folks that your music influences what they do, and what they do influences your music. So having that the ability to communicate your ideas and to have the kind of technical understanding to know how your music is working in the game. If not, certainly being able to open up a text file and actually program or code. Those are typically two people doing with two sets of skills. All right. So the next topic here, I want to talk about a few of the overall goals of the class, what we're doing, what we're here for, what's our ultimate goal with all of this. And before I get into that, I'm going to take a quick pause. Please let me know if you have any questions. But our first thing here, of course, is we are going to be writing music. So hold on just a sec. All right. So, goals of the class. Of course, the first goal is to write music. It's kind of the goal of the entire degree program. And we just, again, are just applying it to games. So we give you game projects that require music in a particular style and approach. And we will see that everybody that submits will have a different approach to the game, and we get to check out all sorts of different styles and solutions to the same set of problems. So we will give you, I kind of take the month from the approach of, take it from the point of view that I am the client who has hired you to work on my game. And you are the music composer and the sound designer, and you are going to, I'll provide you with documentation, and I provide you with the game and videos and information, and you take all of that and actually create the music that is required for the project. So different styles, different approaches. We want to create music that is going to show off your best work and be ready for your demo reel. Another big goal of the class is I have a very important concept, which is known as game research. And game research means you should be playing video games. And this is a very important concept for certainly for the games industry and just for the audio or the entertainment industry as a whole. And no matter what part of the industry you are interested in, this is very important. If you are interested in the music industry, you want to be an artist, you want to be a songwriter or a producer or an engineer, you want to work on music albums, then you should be listening to tons and tons of music. You should be paying attention to music and how they created it. Pay attention to the artist, the producer, the engineer, the record label, what sort of deal they had, technically, how did they create and produce their music. Every aspect that you can pull information-wise about different artists, about their success and what's popular and what's good, and figuring out as much about the industry and technically how the music was created. This will give you a common language that you can share with your clients to describe exactly what's intended for the work. If you are interested in the film industry, you should be watching tons of films. You should be paying attention to the composer and the director and the production company. Get any sort of behind the scenes information. Pay attention to the credits and who's working on different aspects of the film. Because this will give you a common language with film directors when they start describing certain scenes and certain overall vibe and themes that they're trying to approach with their music. If you are interested in the games industry, that means you should be playing tons and tons of video games, paying attention to the composer and the sound designer and the paying attention to the production company and the developer and the publisher and all sorts of different aspects of the development process. This will give you a common language to interact with different game developers and new clients. Because clients speak in terms of previous game projects or previous music albums or previous films. And so it helps to have experience that game or watch that movie or listen to that music. So that means over the course of this month, even if you play games, wonderful. If you don't play games, we will be immersing you in the games industry and be talking about games, and we provide you games to play. So if anybody asks you why you are playing more video games this month, you tell them that you are doing game research for your game music class, and it just so happens to be video games for this month. So always important and honestly still a bit of a challenge to do sometimes because there is so many games out there and so much to keep up with, and games take a lot of time overall to play through, but it's still a very important aspect. Even my video is Metroid is moving just fine, but my video down here is all stuck. Hold on. I'm going to turn that off for the time being. Let me just see if I can get this. Let's see if I can get this back. Why is that? Let's see. I thought there was a lower resolution here. Maybe not. Wow, why is it so slow? Maybe that's better. We'll see how that works. Uh-oh. Now my slides disappeared. No, I disappeared. What is happening here? I am having a bit of an issue. Seems like I'm running slow on RAM or something. Running low and running slow. What is happening here? All right. We'll jump over here. Sorry about that. I'm wondering, my computer is not cooperating with me currently. Why am I over here? Should be over here. All right. Well, anyway, I'll just continue on. Oops. Well, I disappeared. All right. Next, I already did FSO. Talked about that. Wow. Next here is talked about the Composer's Guide to Game Music, your text for the month. So make sure that you get your copy of that, and please let me know if you do not receive it. My next topic here will be getting into the first assignments for your first week here. And we're going to talk about your first game, which is called 2D Platformer. So hopefully you've taken the opportunity to download the game and download the assignment. And here is the video that goes along with this. I just am interested to see how well this plays. Okay, that seems to work. I think it was just maybe Chrome that was giving me issues. Anyway, we will check this out. Okay, so your first game is called 2D Platformer. And it is called that because it is a 2D platform game, which is all means that all you can do is go left and right and maybe jump up and down. And the real purpose is that you are jumping from platform to platform. This is a very, very common approach to lots of different games. It has its history in Super Mario Brothers and Donkey Kong and Mega Man and Metroid and all of these kind of classic, what often started out as Nintendo games and still is popular in lots of different formats. And it's a great place for us to start because it's a pretty simple approach to a game. It doesn't have a lot of in-depth need for music. I mean, the music can be great in its own right, but what it's actually doing in the game is quite straightforward overall. So the game is made by Unity Games, and it is made in the Unity game engine. And if you play a lot of mobile games on iOS or Android, you have probably played a game that has been built in the Unity game engine. This is one of their demo projects that they release for free to the public, and people can tear it apart and check out the music and sound and art and programming and all sorts of different aspects. And so we have set it up with a particular approach to the music for our needs. So the game itself, it's a pretty ridiculous game. You are a bean with a monocle and a bowler hat and a bazooka, and you are defending humanity from the alien invasion. You are in London, and you can tell this because the alien ship has landed on London Bridge. London Bridge, it has fallen down. Big Ben is over here. It's broken. The London Eye is kind of all busted up over here. So there is... you also see some double-decker buses going in the background. And for some reason, you are a bean with a bazooka, and you are there to fend off the alien invasion. So the music is, well, the game itself, it's not a full or complete game. It's really like one level of a much larger game. Very much in the style of how you would work on a game project. You don't get the full completed game. They give you chunks of it as you go, and you work on different pieces and parts, and you build from there. overall style of the music, it's probably the game itself is lighthearted. It's probably an all ages, family friendly type of game. Probably a mobile game, not too serious or time consuming necessarily. You go in, play a mobile game for a couple of minutes, and then you're done. But we leave the music up to you in your particular approach. Your choice of instrumentation, the genre, the overall style of the music. It does need to be kind of upbeat, probably in a major key. Keep it light and airy, nothing too serious or dark or intense. And you need to have drums, need to have bass, harmony, and melody, all of the basic layers there, and we'll talk about how the music is going to build and work in the game. So it needs to have pace, it needs to have energy, it needs to have drums and a strong melody, but the overall choice of instruments and the style of the music we leave more up to you. When you download this assignment, you get this video. You also get a copy of the game and this PDF. And the PDF is going to give you some good information about the project. Hold on, let it figure itself out here. Hold on. There we go. So, the PDF will give you most of the information that you need. Project overview is a lot of these topics that I'm discussing now, and will give you a bit more detail. Game overview talks about the game itself, the style of the game, where it came from. Musical style. I do leave it open to you, but there are a couple of influences that you might pull from. There is the kind of London or British influence because it does that is the setting. That's where it takes place. There's also an alien invasion, kind of maybe a campy sci-fi feel to it, where you could pull some instruments that give you kind of that 50s sci-fi movie feel. So I have a sentence here that says Monty Python versus Mars Attacks, Monty Python meets Mars Attacks, or Benny Hill versus the Body Snatchers, to give you just a bit of a mixture of different ideas to pull from. How to play? Hopefully it should be pretty straightforward to control. You can use the arrow keys on your computer, or if you're familiar with PC gaming, W, A, S, and D, the arrow keys, the directional keys. Spacebar will jump. Left click will fire the weapon. Right click drops bombs. You have to pick up there's a bomb pickup, like this parachute thing that comes from the sky. You pick that up and you can drop some bombs. Instrumentation. Make sure that the instrumentation is consistent across all of the cues. This is it needs to feel like one band playing the entire piece of music. So we're going to see how the music is going to jump between different wave files. But across all of those wave files, you need to have consistent instrumentation. Drums, bass, harmony, melody. And it probably will be more than just four instruments. Drums, solid melodic lead line, and a couple of instruments in support with the bass and harmony. Here is the asset list. This is the part that I really want to get to. The asset list shows you these are the final files that you will deliver. This is ultimately the final result of this project. You will be delivering a series of 9 wave files. And those wave files are divided out into 3 categories. You have 3 intros, 3 main loops, and 3 endings. What the game is going to do is it's going to randomly choose one of the intros at the start of the game to play. Then while the game is being played, during gameplay, you will constantly hear one of these 3 main loops. It will randomly choose one of them, play it through 8 bars, and then when it's done, it will randomly jump to the next, and continue doing that all through gameplay. And then when the game is over, which basically when the player reaches their health is 0, then you hear the ending cues. And it's going to transition over to the ending cues, and you will have a 2-bar musical resolution of the whatever was going on in the main loops. So 9 files. The 3 of them, 3 categories, 3 intros, 3 main loops, 3 endings. Having 3 variations of each will give you randomization, will give you variation over the course of the composition. The intro cues, these are each 2 bars long. All the files are 16-bit 44.1 stereo files. The intro cues do not loop. They're 2 bars. They play through one time at the beginning of the game. The main loops are 8 bars long. They are 16-bit 44.1 stereo, and they do loop, or they have the ability to loop. And then the ending cues, those are also 2 bars. They do not loop. They just play through one time, and they end or resolve the music. So let me jump over here and give an example of how this works. So when the game starts, the music starts as soon as Mr. Bean here drops down to the platform. Music starts, game starts at that point. The game, so the game is running on the computer, and the computer says, okay, the game has started, what do I do? And the program looks at the code and says, okay, it says here that when the game starts, there should be 3 intro files. You're going to randomly choose one of those intro files and play it. Now the game or the computer is going to do all of this for you. So as long as you set up your files in the correct way, correct file name, sample rate, and bit depth, correct mono or stereo channels. So there should be 3 intro files. If everything's set up correctly, then it's going to randomly choose one of those 3 intro files and play it. Now, the game has, or the computer has no concept of your music. It doesn't even really know that there's audio even playing, or that certainly that it's music. All it knows is when that file starts and when that file ends. So, game starts, and it randomly chooses, let's say it randomly chooses intro 3. And it plays through that, plays all the way through the 2 bars and reaches the end. And so the game computer says, okay, that file is over. What do I do now? And the computer looks at the code and says, okay, there should be 3 main loops here. Randomly choose one of them and then play it immediately after the previous file was over. So it randomly chooses main loop 1, 2, or 3, and let's say it chooses main loop 1 this time. So it immediately, once intro 3 ends, it immediately transitions over to the main loop cue. So intro plays, it plays for 2 bars, and then all of a sudden that ends. And without any sort of pause or any sort of interruption, it's going to then randomly choose a main loop cue and play that for the next 8 bars. Then when it reaches the end of that file, it says, okay, what do I do? And the game it says, well, find another main loop and play that one. And just then plays that for 8 bars. And then it says, okay, find the next one. Plays that one for 8 bars. And constantly, this is how you get most of the soundtrack of the game. You are going to have a series of 8-bar loops that randomly change and swap according to what's going on the screen. So the ending cues. How does the game know when the game is over? How does it know, or how does the music know when to end? And that is all done by health points. You may have noticed that Mr. Bean here has a health bar at the top that can go up and down and gets replenished by the health pickups here. But eventually it will run out, like here. by this point, you can see that the bean here has no health, or very, very like a sliver of health. And at this point, when he takes the last bit of damage, the game says, okay, the game is over, or at least this round is over. What do I do? And the computer looks at the code and says, okay, there is a piece of music playing. Go ahead and stop the main loops, and then immediately switch over to the ending cues. So let me go through that quickly here. Game starts, and it randomly chooses an intro file, plays that for 2 bars. Once it's done playing that for 2 bars, then it randomly chooses one of the main loops. Once it reaches the end of that main loop, it randomly chooses another one, and keeps doing that and repeatedly choosing the same main loops over and over again until you lose all of your health points. And then once you've lost all of the health, then it's going to immediately cut off the main loop and switch over to one of the 3 ending cues. So I've got a couple examples of all this. It's certainly enough of me talking about it. Let's go ahead and bring up some examples. Get logic loaded up here. This right here. Okay. So I have a couple different examples here. These examples are different student examples. Each student submission has its own track. And you'll see that all the way over here, these are all the main loop files. Those are 8-bar cues. These are the intros. Those are each 2 bars. And these are the endings. And those are also 2 bars. And they're only in this order because of how they're imported alphabetically. So I'm going to go through and play a couple of these main loops and play a couple of these compositions and just kind of point out a couple of ideas and things to pay attention to. So let's start with the first one here. Please let me know if you can't hear the music or if you can't hear me as we listen here. Well, I can't hear the music. There we go. All right, that looks like it's broadcasting. All right. So the first thing to notice is that main loops loop. They are they extend all the way through the full 8 bars. There are no gaps or pops or clicks as this transitions. There's a strong change going into the next cue. There should be change in the rhythm. There should be change in the bass line, harmonic progression, the melodic lead. Especially the melodic lead will give you the most change from one to the next. But also know that it's the same instruments playing all 3 cues. So the instrumentation stays the same, but the composition changes. Here are 3 intros. So the intros need to build into the main loops. And they would sound something like this. Oops. Now you do have to watch out for things like the cymbal crash at the end here. It gets cut off. something like that. So, and also make sure that you understand that intro 1 is not always going to go to main loop 1, which is not always going to go to ending 1. They have the possibility, excuse me, the possibility of playing in any combination, which gives you the most variation through the whole process. So when you bounce these, you have to make sure that they all make sense when played connected or back-to-back to the main loops. Here are 3 endings. Watch out again for cymbal crashes that get cut off. You want to make sure you, with endings, you can leave enough time to have them fade to silence. But most of the time with the endings, see how this actually reaches silence before the end of the file. You want to make sure that you actually control that, and you don't want it to be artificially cut off. You want to make sure you have control of when it fades to silence. Here's another example. This is still more of a kind of acoustic instrument example. So change from one to the next. Strong melodic development. And they can all play in any sort of order, because they maintain the same key, they maintain the same tempo and time signature, maintain the same instrumentation. It's the same band playing the same song, but melodically there's changes, rhythmically there's changes, it's just variation on a similar theme or idea. Here are 3 intros. Let's turn that up. So the intros need to create a strong build or rise into the main loops. Here are 3 endings. So strong musical resolutions. Put a nice period at the end of the sentence. The ending cues are going to start at the same strength or power as the main loops and find their way to silence by the end. Let me jump down here to some other ones. Here's one that's a bit more. Well, let's do this one. This one's a bit more electronic overall, much more kind of old school kind of game audio, game music, very synth based. Those are the intros. Let's do the main loops here. So, whichever direction you want to kind of head, everything should be strong and upbeat and like I said, nothing too dark or depressing or anything like that. Keep it bouncy. I mean, it doesn't have to be in a major key. It can still be in a minor key, but still have some energy and forward movement and pace to it. Here are 3 intros. And 3 endings. Excellent. So, that hopefully should give you a couple of different examples of our composition here and our overall intention with the composition and the musical direction. So please take the time to download the game and play that, read through all the documentation, and let me know if you have any questions on the composition itself. A couple of suggestions here. Compose interesting loops. One of the biggest deficiencies or challenges that I find in all of this is repetitive music. The music, by its nature of being at the most 8-bar loops, is going to be repetitive on its own. So you don't want to make it any more repetitive by repeating. Sometimes I'll get a 4-bar phrase that's repeated twice, or a 2-bar phrase that's repeated 4 times, or even a 1-bar phrase that's repeated 8 times over and over again. And then on top of that, it loops and gets quite monotonous and repetitive. So use the full 8 bars and each of the 8 bars to develop your melody. Make sure everything loops and transitions smoothly. There should be no pops or gaps or fades or anything like that. Well, that's down here in the continuous loops. Transitions means that there's a similar instrumentation that maintains a continuous kind of tone and volume and pace from one cue to the next. Changing keys, changing tempos, all that will just create havoc unless it is done extremely intentionally. The problem, I mean, a lot of games do that, certainly, but the problem is switching within 8 bars. It's very quick to do key changes and rhythmic changes that are constantly flip-flopping all over the place. What else? Overall mix. You want to make sure that you have a strong mix, peaks up towards -1, or like right in between 0 and -1. Average level somewhere between -15 and -7 or 8. Well, it's probably maybe -15, -10, somewhere in there for the average RMS level. Once you have created your music, you can actually put it into the game, and the process details how you will set all of that up. You will take the game application. Where is my copy of that? Hold on. Here it is. Week 1. Right here. There it is. Okay, so here's the copy of the game. And when you have everything set up and ready to go, you can test it out in the game. You right-click on the game application and choose Show Package Contents, and it gives you this folder named Contents. You double-click in there, and you can go to Data and Streaming Assets. And in Streaming Assets, you'll find 2 folders. One that has sound effects in it, and this, you hear the sound effects in the game. There is no music in the game. That's your job. You will create all the music, and you will put that music in that folder. Next week, you will create all the sound effects, and you will replace all of these sound effects with your own. Go ahead. You can take the 9 WAV files that once you've created all of the music and place it into that music folder, and your music should work the next time you play the game. and that information is here in the screenshot. You'll take a screenshot of the of your DAW session. Show me kind of how you have everything set up, and then you'll deliver all the files and post them up on FSO. Your other assignment for this week is a production technique in how you would set up different looping music for playback in a game. Looping music is extremely important and very necessary for our game soundtrack because it allows us to musically sit in one place while the player figures something out, either defeats the enemy or finds the secret or the puzzle, solves the puzzle, and then we can rotate around and around in that music until they figure it out, and then we can move on into the next piece of music. So all of your compositions will require you to create looping pieces of music. And there's a couple of different techniques here that I want to go over really quick to help that process. So hold on just a sec. I have a logic session here. All right, so when you download this assignment, you get a logic session that has everything kind of set up ready for you to go. And it works through 3 different looping editing techniques. Some of these should be, will be quite straightforward and maybe something you've done if you've worked with loops before, and other techniques might be a little bit more unique and more appropriate to game music. So here is the logic session, and when you open it up, it gives you some notes on the session, which is basically a summary of the assignment itself, and you get 3 parts, and you can or the assignment comes in 3 parts, and you can get access to any of these 3 parts just by double clicking on that particular region. You can hit this up arrow over here to get out of this particular folder track. You can double click into this part and get into. Let me just kind of tidy this up a bit. You can back out of there. So just to navigate around this session, you double click on any part and then hit the up arrow to return back. And you can see everything that is happening in that particular area. All right, so our first technique here is just regular old editing, what is known as topping and tailing a file. And I provide you with an audio file that you will edit out loops and also an edit track down here. And I would suggest that I'm just going to make a copy of this down to my edit track. I'm going to mute the original. And I'm going to, the assignment asks that you bounce out 3 different intensity loops. So let's do this. Here's the music. And we just find the 3 different intensities of music, and it's kind of built so that there's one section here and another section here and over here. So if you want to do a basic file edit, you're going what's known as topping and tailing the file. You need to find the top of it, you need to find the tail. And that is pretty straightforward in this piece of music because there's some really obvious cymbal crashes that we can use. Right there. And we can take that cymbal crash as the downbeat of this particular rhythm. So I'm going to zoom way in and find 0 crossing point where both of the lines are as close to 0 as possible, starting right at the attack of the first hit or note, and I'm going to split the file there. Then all I need to do is find the next cymbal crash, go all the way through with think it's either 4 or 8 bars, and find the next crash and make my next edit there. And that is right here. Let me just double check that. Let me just double check that again. And I lost it. Right there. So we'll do the same thing. Zoom way in, find a good zero crossing point, and make a split there. Now, when I go listen to this, and if I set it up to loop, it should be a seamless loop. All right, and so that's just finding the downbeat to start the loop, and then the next downbeat to end the loop, making edits as tight and close to it as possible, while still paying attention to zero crossing points. So, and I'm going to completely cheat here, but eventually this might be what it looks like. Split. You might have something like this where these, of course, would be perfectly edited loops, but you have of the first one, a lower intensity, medium intensity, and a higher intensity. So that's the first technique of just basic file editing. I can hit this arrow at the top again to get me out of there, and go over to part 2. And in part 2, we want to be able to bounce MIDI in a loop without any sort of hiccups or issues in that loop. And so we need to create a specific bounce. And we can do this and create a regular bounce first, or just, well, both ways are just going to be a regular old bounce. But the way we set it up will be unique. So here is the music for this part. All right, so some drums and a couple of different synths there, and we want to bounce this out as a loop. So the thing to pay attention here is there's a whole bunch of cymbal crash and delay and there's some reverb and some really good stuff in there. Even when you, it's constantly going, but when you hit stop, you really hear it. And we want to make sure that all of that is captured in this bounce. So I'm going to do a regular bounce at this point. Bring this back up. I'm going to bounce this. I'm going to add it, and I don't want to include audio tail. And everything else looks good, so I'm just going to bounce that. And just keep going up here. All right, so we bounce that out. Now, if we listen to this, take this, put this here. All right. So if you listen to this, here's the original. Let's turn that down. And then here's the bounce. Oops. Sounds good. The only thing is listen for that cymbal crash at the end. gets cut off. So doing a regular bounce this way can create issues with loops, because every time it goes to the end, that cymbal crash that was just hit gets cut off. So we want to figure out a way of maintaining any sort of crossover that happens, would kind of be playing past the end of the loop. That is delays, reverbs, instrument decay, anything that kind of tails off a little bit longer. So our solution here is we're going to double the length of all of this. We're going to take all of the MIDI, and we're just going to double the length of that. We're going to hold. Highlight all these and hold Option and drag these and just make it twice as long. And that's all we need to do. Now we're going to bounce it out again. We're going to make sure it's twice as long. Everything looks good. Let me turn it back up. Oops, that's not the button I wanted to hit. And we will try again. All right, so we've just taken all of that. We've bounced it out twice as long. We're going to mute these out. Check this one out. So, it's twice as long. We have a question in the chat. So you bounced the MIDI to audio. Yeah, all I've done so far is I just took the original MIDI and bounced it out, and then realized that the cymbal crash at the end gets cut off. So in order to fix that, what we're going to do is we just took everything and made it twice as long. And we're going to come here right in the middle at bar 197, and I can just split this in half. And if I only use the second half of this and I listen to this loop, it should create a seamless loop as it goes from the end back to the beginning. So hopefully you can hear that kind of crossover as it returns from the end. And it works because anything that was caught off over here is actually captured at the beginning of this file, because it used to be one file altogether. So this works really well. All we did here was we took the original files, we duplicated them, the original MIDI, made it twice as long, bounced it out, chopped it in half, and deleted the first half. And once we have done that, then we have a seamless loop here that will not create any issues as it goes around and around. So this is what you're going to do for this electronic loop. There's also an orchestral loop over here. Let's see if this will play. And so a passage like this would have issue also, because there'd be instrument decay, some reverb tail, all this stuff that would kind of lay over that last little bar. So we want to prevent anything like that. We do the same technique here. Right, so that's the second approach. doubling the length of the MIDI, bouncing it, chopping in half, and only using the second half. And our last technique is creating loops from music that does not loop very well. And it actually works very well with pads and drones. But we're going to try to create a loop from this. Let me just play this real quick. So this is a very interesting sounding kind of soundscape, pad, drone kind of thing. And we want to loop this. Maybe this would be a really cool layer for a larger composition. And we want to set this up to loop, but it's not something that's easily looped. I'm going to kind of hack at this and see how close I get. If I just kind of blindly did this and set up to loop. All right, let's check the loop. All right, very sudden change. Sudden change in pitch and volume. Doesn't sound good as it switches around. It becomes very obvious where the loop is. So we want to make this loop. And it's kind of a quick and easy approach to make most anything loop. All we have to do is we have to find a chunk that we want to loop. And as I go through this, notice that I'm going to be doing this just blindly. I'm not even going to need to listen to it. It works even without listening to it. That's probably not a good idea because you want to know how it sounds and you want to make sure you're looping the right thing. But just to show you the overall process, this works just making the edits wherever you need. So I'm going to take a chunk. I'm just going to find a piece here. You need to take a chunk that's a little bit bigger than the final loop that you want because you're going to cut it down a little bit. So all I did was edited this out and split the file and deleted the part in before and after it. So this is what I want to loop. And in order to make this easily loop, I'm going to chop it in half. So I go somewhere in the middle and I split the file. Then I'm going to take the left side and put it over the right side. I'm not going to go all the way over here. I'm going to leave a little bit of overlap in the middle. And the next thing I need to do is just create a crossfade. Now the outside edges are perfect. They're seamless. They won't cause any issue. Sounds like this. So the outside edges are completely seamless, but this inside part now, well, that wasn't so bad. But this inside part will cause issue as it changes from one to the next. Let me do that again. I'm just going to take a chunk here, split, split, delete, delete. Take this and split it in half. And then take these two sides. I'm going to leave a bit of overlap there. And see what happens as it switches from one to the next. And then loops back around. So if there's an inconsistency here in the middle, what you can do is you can create a large fade between the two. And by doing that, we'll crossfade across any sort of issues that might be here in the middle. Let's check that out. So, whoops, I didn't set that up to loop. So the outside edges are seamless. It's going to create a perfect loop. And the reason that is because, well, you chopped out a section. Chop, chop, delete, delete. So this is the part that you want to loop. Then you took that and you split it in half. Took the left side and you dragged it over the right side, but you left a little bit of room in between. Now the outside edges are perfect. So you go through and you do a crossfade. That allows one thing to slowly fade out while the new one fades in. And this works on all sorts of different stuff. I'll do this over here real quick. Right here. Right here. Make this file loop quickly. So I'll take that and I will edit and edit. Take a chunk of the file. Go to the middle of it, split the file in half, take the left over the right. And this should be fine. We'll do a fade across the middle. Let's do this. So it should create seamless loops. Different approaches for looping files, whether it's chopping in half and flipping the two sides and crossfading the middle, or bouncing out MIDI by duplicating the length of the regions, or just editing, topping, and tailing a file. Should give you some good direction on this assignment as to how to approach editing loops. And the reason we do this in the beginning of the month is because you'll need it all the way through the month on all of your different compositions because they all require some form of loops. So that should be all from me today. Give us a good introduction to the assignments for the week. Please make sure you're downloading everything and checking out the assignments and working on them earlier in the week so we can address any sort of issues or challenges that you encounter. I'm going to stick around for a few minutes after the class to answer any sort of questions. And we got a good question here. Should we do this looping assignment before the game? I typically think that it probably takes folks a couple of different sessions to work on the game. So I would say that you should probably do this looping assignment before you're bouncing everything out, because that's really where that technique comes into play. You can certainly compose and get ideas together and maybe take a pass at the actual composition of everything. And then when you get that gets too much, you can like wander away and maybe take some time and do this assignment, work your way through that, and maybe come back at the assignment. Or, but you should understand these techniques before you completely finish the game composition. So wherever you want to throw it in with all of that. But yeah, very helpful for all of your assignments through the month. All right, so thank you very much, and hopefully you have a good rest of your afternoon, and we will meet again on Thursday. All right, have a good one.